Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Davina Lyons.
This meeting is being recorded.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Davina Lyons. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, and welcome to this professional development webinar brought to you by both the Fashion Network and the E-Commerce Club. I'm the Managing Director at the E-Commerce Club, and we have sitting in the background, listening in and able to interject if he sees fit, Dow, who heads up the Fashion Network as well. So we're looking at composable commerce today for retail businesses, online masterclass, but you know, not only will we be imparting sort of like our knowledge, or the panel will be imparting their knowledge, this is also an opportunity for you. It's an opportunity for you to actually let us know what's going on in your minds, you know, if there's anything that we can assist with, if you have questions that you want to ask the panel, then there will be plenty of opportunities to be able to do that. Probably sort of like, you know, one of the easiest ways to do it is actually going to be through the chat box. So feel free to be using the chat box throughout, and also sort of like towards the end, if you've got a question and you'd prefer to raise your hand and actually come on screen, then we can also pull you onto screen. But we will be keeping an eye on that chat box in order to be able to see if there are any questions and any comments and so on that we think are relevant to the conversation. So please do sort of like join in there. In order to kind of sort of kick off, or actually before we do that, I mean, we are recording this, so if you do have to dip out at any point, or you've got a colleague that you think might benefit, then it will be available on YouTube. And there's also a networking session after this as well that you can get involved with. I think to kick off, it would be really useful that as you're tuned in, and before I introduce the panel, we'd like to kind of understand where you are in terms of your physical location, which business you're involved in, so which sort of company or website that you're involved in, and your role within that. But also, I think it would be quite interesting to understand, you know, what's on your mind. Why have you signed up to this? Is there like a particular pain point? Is there something when it comes to your sort of like your e-commerce platform and the management of that that's been presenting an issue, or actually maybe you've got it all resolved and this is just to reassure you that you've done everything that you need to do. So if there is anything that you think, you know, would be useful for us to understand in terms of sort of like your sort of thinking and why you're here, then please pop that in there, and then we might be able to address that as we go through the conversation. So please start dropping that in whenever you see fit. So I want to thank very much Better Commerce, who are sponsoring the webinar today, and that means that allows us to be able to create this content and to be able to put it on for you. So thank you very much to Better Commerce, and that is a nice kind of sort of way for me to introduce Finley Muir, who's the VP of Sales and Marketing at Better Commerce. So Finley has over 15 years experience in sales and marketing, e-commerce and tech services. He's now the VP of Sales and Marketing at Better Commerce and has the responsibility to support mid-market retailers and brands who wish to adopt modern technology and find new ways to scale and grow. One of the things that Finley was telling us that he's very much involved in at the moment is training for the London Marathon, and he's going to raise money for the RNIB. Outside of running and doing squats in his living room, he loves to take his little puppy Frankie for nice walks around London, and I believe Frankie is still around in the background, so hopefully he's fast asleep at the moment. But yes, thank you very much, Finley, for joining us. We also have Sana Remeki, who's the CEO of Consia. Sana is a speaker, author, and technology thought leader in the fields of digital experience and data management. As a graduate of the system design engineering, she has spent over 15 years designing and architecting data-centric solutions. She was recently listed as in one of the top 10 most influential women in technology, which is an amazing achievement by Analytics Insight, and is an ambassador of the Mac Alliance, which I'm sure we'll find out a little bit more about. She likes to read audio books, and also to learn about world history, self-improvement and entrepreneurs, spending time with her 8 and 9-year-old daughters, and traveling is a big thing on her list too. So it sounds like Sana's probably sort of like well versed in many things other than e-commerce, so we might be able to get some insights there too. And then sort of finally on our panel today, we have Mike Steer, who's the head of e-commerce at River. Mike has spent the last decade developing solutions for clients clients and has worked on a variety of platforms, from the monolithic stack to the new world of composable and headless. As head of e-commerce, Mike has responsibility for the whole e-commerce space at River. And in his free time, and he has two small children, so this is obviously sort of more limited than most, he finds ways to indulge his other loves, which are food, craft beer, Formula One, Star Wars, and all things tech. So I think sort of what we want to go to first, before we kind of hand over to the panel for the first questions, it would be useful if we could actually put up the poll. And what we wanted to kind of sort of get an idea of here is, do you already know what composable commerce is? So if you can let us know, if you already know sort of like what composable commerce is, please sort of like vote now. And also, as I say, remember to pop into that chat box whereabouts you are and which company you are working with and your role within that. And that again sort of like will help us give some context. So please feel free to kind of pop that into the chat box at any stage. There we are. So, but that's pretty even actually, panel. And I'm going to kind of hand over to you sort of like momentarily, but yep, surprisingly sort of like, you know, surprisingly even, isn't it, Finlay?
I think that's a good sign. I have to say, I'm very pleased. Yeah. I expected it to be slightly different, but that's a very good sign. It tells us that we're doing the right thing, right? Talking about this subject, building a community, and making people aware about its potential. So I'm very pleased to see that.
Excellent. Well, hopefully by the end of this, it will be 100% of people know what composable commerce is. So I think if we can go over to you, Sana, you've got you're going to give us a little bit of context, a little bit of kind of setting the scene as to the basics. What is composable commerce?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is definitely a very interesting topic, and sometimes a bit of a confusing topic as well. So I've actually created a bit of a mind map to describe what are all of the various aspects of composable. So what does composable really mean? If I was to just define it in a very quick way, composable means the ability for organizations to build their commerce platforms from a variety of best of breed vendors, right? So you may have a vendor that gives you the CMS capability, and another vendor for your product information management system, another one for search, and another one for commerce engine per se. And the list goes on. There's a bunch more capabilities that are required within your commerce platform that can come from a variety of different vendors. Now, this is in contrast to the traditional world of monolithic vendors, where one vendor provides all of the capabilities related to commerce. So these, companies like Salesforce or Adobe or Bloomreach, they would claim that they have all of the capability that you need to run your entire commerce business in one and all-in-one solution. Now, the reason why I have this mind map is there's a lot of confusion around, what makes something composable, or what lends itself better in terms of being composable. So that's where the idea of headless comes into play. So you'll hear a lot about headless platforms. Headless platforms generally have the ability to integrate easily with each other, with other systems within the platform through this idea of APIs. So they integrate easily by having the standard way of communicating with other systems through APIs, and they actually keep the content very much separate from the actual visual experience or the rendered experience that you see in the front end. And the whole idea behind headless is that you want to build omni-channel digital experiences. You want to write content once, and you want to use it everywhere on all channels, whether it be web, mobile, email, social media, SMS, whatever you can think of. You want to be able to control that experience and that content from a centralized location. And typically, headless vendors lend themselves well in terms of creating that composable architecture, right? Because they have the ability to connect very, very easily. And now, one point that I want to note is that there is this idea of monolithic vendors. And what does that mean? Monolithic, as I said, is one platform, with an all-in-one solution, all of the business capabilities provided or business functionalities provided in a single platform. Now, can monolithic platforms also be composable? And that is the argument that has taken hold of this DX industry in the recent times. And from my understanding, and we can argue about this later, but yes, they can be, right? Monolithic vendors could actually package their capabilities in a completely headless way and also be a composable platform. Traditional monolith solutions, on the other hand, don't do that. So all of the content presentation capabilities are very intertwined with each other, and you can't actually use each of the individual business functionalities independently of everything else within a traditional platform. But there's a lot more I can say here. In fact, I ran a session on this a couple of weeks back, which was supposed to be a 30-minute session, and it ended up being a 2-hour discussion about this. So I won't go into all of the details yet, but I just wanted to give you an idea of how much there is to think about as an industry about what composable is, what composed applications are, such as better commerce. And I won't say too much more because I know Finlay has a lot more to say about that. But yeah, that's in a nutshell.
Thank you so much. And I think you're right. I think there's going to be so much more that we want to kind of draw out. And I've got loads of questions spinning around in my head as well. But I think we wanted to kind of sort of set the scene. And I know, Finlay, you know, you were going to give us a little bit of a kind of sort of history almost of how we've got to this point, that kind of journey, I suppose, to composable.
Yeah, so I guess one of the things that Sana mentioned there is that idea of, you know, best of breed, right? So the concept being able to stitch together the best of breed solutions to create your tech stack is the nirvana state that everyone wants to get to. So, you know, I think it's quite interesting to look back and think about, well, where, you know, how have we got here? So, you know, every now and then there are, you know, key fundamental shifts in the technology landscape. Now, for example, the adoption of cloud-based platforms from on-premise to cloud, that was a huge, you know, fundamental shift in the technology landscape. There was also the explosion of SaaS-based platforms, tools, and applications. And as Sana mentioned as well, the huge appetite towards headless and serverless architectures. So these are three, in my opinion, these are three fundamental shifts in the technology landscape that have really paved the way for composable commerce. And these are the things that have really you know, come together in certain ways that have made composable what it is today, and why people are starting to think about this new architecture. You know, how could they reshape their enterprise to be more agile, to be more flexible, et cetera, et cetera. So it hasn't just appeared out of nowhere. There's been fundamental shifts, key moments in time that have paved the way for this new approach and this new philosophy, which is composable commerce. And just to add a bit more context there as well from the, I guess, consumer side, omni-channel is no longer, you know, a nice to have. You know, it's a fundamental, I guess, proposition. You have to be able to communicate with your customers across multiple different touch points. And be able to do that in a very personalized and engaging way. So the combination of omni-channel personalization and key fundamental shifts in technology have come together to really focus on composable commerce, in my opinion, as the future of retail. And it's our jobs to educate people on these new principles and you know, hopefully help them support in this transition from, say, monolithic to a composable world.
And I don't know, sort of like Mike, Sana, whether you've got anything that you think is useful to add there in terms of sort of, you know, why we've kind of come to this point where composable seems to be the kind of sort of, you know, the next best step for most.
I'll jump in there quickly, just from my side. I think one of the big kind of benefits of the composable stuff is probably speed. Speed to deliver, speed to build, but also speed of the websites. I think there's a stat from Gartner that 80% of composable websites can be faster than your average build. I think the kind of headless approach has kind of paved the way for that. Composable kind of builds on that. I think when you're looking at SEO and all those kind of aspects and just customer experience, having fast websites is going to be key. I think moving on to the omni-channel thing, which been kind of pointed out, people aren't just getting to websites via search now. Like there's so many different ways people are connecting via kind of social or via kind of content, and I think having that all connected up is now hugely important, and you just can't seem to get that kind of connection with kind of more traditional monolith systems. So having that kind of composable, kind of connected experience is so much more important now.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Sana, have you got anything else that you think is relevant there?
I think the only thing I would add is that in the traditional monolithic world, and it's just picking up from what Mike is saying here, the focus was very much on the website. It was a very page-centric, web-centric experience that we had with the traditional digital experience platforms, or DXPs. And with the composable, the shift to composable, it's allowing organizations to go beyond the web and taking each of the individual vendor capabilities in a very centralized way to just manage a very specific function that is not just meant for one channel, and it can scale to all sorts of channels, right? So it's the way all of these technologies come together in a headless and API first way that gives us the ability to now go fully omni-channel, unlike the past.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've got a question sort of like potentially from a member of the audience as well. So I don't know if we can go over to Nick, who wanted to potentially to ask the panel something already. So you must have already stirred up some sort of like some thoughts in the audience. So I don't know if we can pop sort of like Nick onto the screen.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Nick. How are you?
I'm good. I'm a fan of Finn, so that's part of why I'm here. But guys, the chat is disabled, so I can't post any chat, and I don't know if anyone else can.
Ah, I wondered why. We seem to be able to post in it, but I wondered why no one's actually sort of doing that. So, okay, Dale, I'm gonna have to pass that back to the tech people in the background.
I'm happy to ask good questions later, but carry on, and yeah, that would be why you're not getting any engagement.
Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you, Nick, for flagging that. But yeah, do
No
ask
worries.
a question for us later. Brilliant. Thank you. All right, we'll fix that in the background then. So if you haven't been able to post into chat, then we'll get that sorted out in a moment for you. So Finley, I think we kind of want to go back over towards you in terms of the sort of packaged business capabilities. So if you can kind of give us a bit of an understanding as to, you know, what they are, what's their purpose, you know, what do you need to be considering, that would be really useful. And I believe there's a kind of slide as well to support this.
Yes, so I think the slide will come up quite soon. I think, you know, essentially what a packaged business capability is, it's an application developed around a particular business function, right? It's there to solve specific business problems, and they become a part of your composable tech stack. And I think there is a slide, I don't know, Dale, if you're able to bring up the slide. So yeah, so as I was saying, so PBCs, they're specific applications designed to solve specific business problems. And at Better Commerce, we've designed 6 of these, and you can see them on your screen. And they range from everything from your PIM, so being able to manage your product catalog, all your descriptions and images, and everything that comes around with managing your product catalog. Your e-commerce, your website, your store, your checkout, your CMS, your order management capabilities, how you engage with your customers, and how you analyze and help to grow your business. So PBCs are effectively the building blocks that you would be able to stitch together to be able to build your composable tech stack. And you know, as I say, our clients can use them individually. So in many cases, we have some clients that would just use, say, one of these PBCs, and we have other clients that use all 6. So how we, position this is that they are valuable alone, but invaluable together. And what we do with our clients is that we scope out their requirements, we understand their business goals and challenges. We touched on before, a lot of retailers are still stuck with, say, monolithic end-to-end all-in-one solutions. They're trying to become more flexible and more agile. They're trying to focus more on omnichannel and so forth, some of the things we talked about before. And we offer these PBCs, package business capabilities, and it's up to our clients to pick and choose which ones they want. And in some cases, as I said, it could be more than one, or it could just be the case that they're looking at a new PIM. And the way that we've designed it through headless and APIs, you can very easily integrate any of these PBCs with your existing tech stack or help it to design a future state. It's not a case that you have to rip and replace. There's methodologies to be able to do this step by step, and that's what we help our clients do.
I think we've fixed chat now, so we might well get some more sort of like questions and so on sort of like coming through from chat. But is there anything else that anyone sort of like, has to add in terms of the PBCs from the panel?
I don't think so. Only I think from obviously the better commerce side, it's nice to have that kind of built-in functionality that you can pick and choose what you want. Ultimately, a customer may have their own CMS that they're tied to, or they have a particular relationship with, and the beauty of that system is that you can just use that system, and that's the beauty of the Composable, is that having that openness to pick what is right for you.
And I think that's what we want to kind of move on to next anyway, Mike, isn't it? Is let's really have a think about what are the benefits of Composable Commerce. So if you can kind of sort of kick off with that, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose I'll try not to use this word to death, but I suppose flexibility is the key. I'm going to try and put a word limit on how many times I use this time, or maybe use different words. But I think that is one of the massive kind of benefits of this, and it's using that best in breed. It's really allowing you to build the right system. I mean, my background predominantly up until more recently has been in kind of the monolith space, and that is where flexibility is obviously quite difficult, because the back end and the front end are so tightly coupled. When there's a business change and a business requirement, putting that change into place is quite tricky, because you're making changes that are so tightly coupled with other parts of the system. They're so closely integrated. The change in the back end might affect something on the front end or another part of the system. And it's something that needs to be really well thought out. Not that it doesn't in Composable, but it's something that adds additional complexity in a monolith, and in terms of testing and whatnot. In terms of the Composable model, because it's so kind of separated and kind of, although all the parts connect to each other in a way, they're isolated as well, so they can kind of be tested in isolation, they can be used in isolation, and then they can be kind of swapped in and out. So it's that ability to just kind of pick the right items for what you need, being able to swap them out when a better service or a more suitable service comes along without completely changing stack. It's just more suitable. Things like vendor lock-in as well. If you feel that you're locked into a vendor with a monolith, it's a massive issue. Whereas there's still vendor lock-in potentially with microservices, but at least it's one element of the system that you can then switch out, rather than looking to move to an entirely new system.
Absolutely. Sana, do you have anything to add in terms of the benefits of Composable?
Yeah, I think from a benefit standpoint, I think Mike and Finlay have done a great job summarizing them. One of the challenges on the other side that I've seen, and I think that there are solutions to this, and something that Better Commerce does very well as well is, one of the things that businesses have to think about is their workflows, right? When they're dealing with multiple vendors, you have a product information management system to manage your product info, and CMS to manage your content. In this current world of commerce, content and commerce are coming together quite a bit, right? So there's a lot of content on products that have to be managed, and you need to bring them together in some way. Now, Better Commerce does a good job of providing a single interface to marketing teams and content teams to manage all of that content within the same interface without having to switch screens, right? From your CMS back to your PIM, back to your commerce engine, etc. Whereas, so there is good and bad, right? In both sides. You can have a best of breed solution by picking different vendors for each of these capabilities, but sometimes in certain scenarios, depending on the size of your team, depending on who your customer is, it may actually be easier for customers to deal with, with one system for certain set of packaged business capabilities. And this doesn't mean that it needs to be all of the capabilities in one platform. It's just that certain things go well together, like a PIM and a CMS. They go, in my opinion, they go well together just because of the trend towards the marriage between content and commerce that we're seeing in the industry. Finlay, do you have something to say about that?
Yeah, I think we had this discussion the other day, and I've just noticed the next question in the chat as well, which is quite interesting around composable and who is it most suited to, right? And I think the true enterprise retailers, the largest players out there, the billion-dollar organizations, they almost have a requirement to invest in technology. They have big teams. They have employees, they have CTOs, they have big infrastructures. So it becomes a requirement for them to invest in a highly customizable, composable world. Then so it's very well suited to the enterprise. Then you take the mid-market segment, which doesn't have the luxury, of huge budgets, huge IT teams. They're trying to figure out how to deal with this, and it's still possible to, I guess, head down a composable route. And our position and why we're here to help support mid-market retailers is we do come with those pre-packaged capabilities. So we're saying, here is a PIM, that does most of the things you need it to do. If we need to extend it in some ways or customize it to suit your requirements, we can do that. But it doesn't require you to invest heavily in building it from the ground up or hiring a huge tech team, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the composable movement is accessible by all, but depending on the size of the retailer, whether you're mid to enterprise, there are different paths. And as I said, just to repeat, I think our PVCs, the slide that you saw earlier, they're composable modules. And yeah, I think they're most suited for the mid-market who do not have the luxury of huge IT teams and investment.
And is it cost prohibitive then? Because you kind of mentioned the mid-market and you've mentioned enterprise, but maybe for those what we might call fast growth retailers, so those ones that are sort of like coming in at the bottom end and are kicking off, and they've got a great idea and they maybe get a little bit of momentum behind them, but they're not very sort of cash rich. Is there a kind of entry point that you can come in?
So I think, just to add just a little bit to that, maybe the other guys, I think in the past it was your sort of tech stack was set up and designed to be left alone. Leave it alone, let it do its thing, and that's fine. But that's just not acceptable in today's world, where we're talking about uber hyper personalization, true omni-channel, and all the things that we've mentioned so far. So a different approach is required, no matter what size, whether you're small or large. But what I guess I'm saying is there are different degrees of composability. There's different ways in which you could do it. And if cost is a prohibitor for the mid-market, in our opinion, then our approach is best suited to them. You're not having to start from scratch and design everything, build those UI dashboards that Sana was mentioning in terms of being able to manage lots of different systems. So I think composable is certainly accessible to everyone. There's just different ways to approach it.
Yeah.
I would say, sorry, I would just say composability is more of a spectrum. It's not so much a binary yes or no. There's tons and tons of packaged business capabilities that can be considered in a composable architecture, and you can go with 3 vendors that offer all of them, or 10 vendors, or 50 vendors, depending on how granular you want to go for each of these capabilities. So it's that boundary around the packaged business capabilities that has to be considered. What do you call a packaged business capability? Is it some people have content operations platforms that are separate from the content production and content management platforms, right? Others will go with content management, production, operations, enrichment, all of it together in one platform, right? So there's a lot of choice out there. And I think that organizations just have to be careful with how granular or how macro they go in terms of their, in terms of which vendors they pick, depending on the size of their teams, the capabilities within the team, the budget that they have, the time that they have to build out that overall system that they need to build. There's a ton of different things, but the good thing is that there are options out there, and I really like the fact that with Better Commerce, especially for the mid-market, you have the ability to pick and choose what you want to either build or buy from another vendor, and what you want to go with within Better Commerce.
Yeah, so it allows you to have a not to be able to do it all at once. In effect, you can
exactly.
kind of can choose sort of the bits that you want to to kind of sort of to plug in. And I think also, surely, sort of like one of the other things is it comes down to knowledge. Because if you are sort of like a younger company, maybe you might not have the knowledge of the marketplace and all the tech and all of the sort of best of breed in sort of certain areas. So that could be sort of like, a very off-putting thing to, to kind of take that on almost. And have you seen that? Have you seen people sort of think that they can take this approach and then completely mess it up?
Yeah, well, I'd like to think that it maybe doesn't happen that often, right? Because that's not a good place to be. And I think we do try and with our clients, certainly we try and paint a roadmap which is step by step, right? It's granular. It's let's do one thing at a time. And we'll actually talk a bit later on about POCs and how they can be quite useful to create a business case and validate that something is going to work before you make the big mistake and have to undo it all, et cetera, et cetera. But I think the knowledge is very important. This is a different way of doing things. You need to have, certainly you need to have different skill sets. You need to have a different mindset. It's as we said many times, it's going from a linear kind of monolithic all-in-one solution to a best of breed. It sounds easy, but actually under the hood, it's a bit complex. And some of the things that Sana and Mike have mentioned, being able to stitch them together and so on. So yeah, there is a bit of a challenge, but that's why we're doing things like today, is to try and open up the conversation and show people that, not to be scared of composable or worried. It's certainly in my opinion, the future of retail and how we're going to help retailers grow and scale. But yeah, there is a bit of education that needs to happen, and we're all learning. And so I welcome anyone who wants to follow up with us afterwards, to discuss any of these subjects.
Exactly, that's great. And do you think then, Mike, maybe sort of this for you, do you think that in order to achieve this, you need to have a head of e-commerce or sort of a CTO or equivalent that has quite a lot of industry knowledge? I mean, this isn't for the founder, for example, sort of like, who might have a great concept, but might not sort of like truly understand the sort of like the tech stack.
I think, education is obviously key, as Finlay said, which is obviously why these things like today are great. We're going to get that 47% that aren't familiar with the commerce up to speed. But I think it does take a certain digital maturity to go down that kind of route and to have an awareness to go down there. And obviously there's a company like myself that will obviously guide you and go through a discovery process and work out what the right solution is and help you build it. But I think there needs to be some some experience within the company that has a need to go down that route as well. There's many reasons why you do that in terms of moving, whether it's kind of a wanting to keep ahead of the crowd or whether there's limitations on your current system. But ultimately, I think it is important to have buy-in from the top in terms of wanting to go down that composable route.
Yeah. Absolutely. And we've got a couple of questions from the audience. One of them was one that I was going to ask as well, but I'm going to come to Farouk first. So Farouk asked, how do customers react to the change from using traditional monolithic solutions to a composable architecture, and what are their biggest pain points? So I don't know who wants to pick that one up.
So can you repeat the question, sir?
Yes, of course. So how do customers react to the change from using traditional monolithic solutions to a composable architecture? I suppose also, would they know? And what are their biggest pain points?
Yeah, so I mean, I can go for it. So certainly I think it's the ones that we speak to anyway, as Mike said, there's already an appetite there to, they've done the research, they're aware of the movement, they've read a few things, there's an appetite there, and this concept comes up quite a lot, the cost of not doing anything. Right. So what if you don't do anything, right? You've got to somehow use technology to enable your business in some shape or form. And as we've sort of painted at the beginning, this headless and composable architecture is certainly building momentum, right? So something is going on and it's being validated in the market. So so how do they react? Obviously, there's intrigue, there's interest, and you know what I'm trying to do is make them aware that, well, first of all, let's build the use case and the business case that this is actually worthwhile doing, and we can crunch numbers, we can do proof of concepts, all those things. And I think the benefits of composable are quite well understood. You know, it's flexible, it's agile, it plays well into the personalization element that we talked about before, omnichannel. So what is there not to like about it? You know, it could be a bit daunting, and it will have an impact on your teams. Like when you move into this architecture, you're enabling teams to act independently of each other. So they have more autonomy and more responsibility to do things and deliver things. So there's an element of training and things that need to happen there. But that's progress. You know, that's nothing to be scared of or worried about. That's just part of the process. So I think once there's an appetite there to consider this, it's a great conversation. So to try and answer the question, I think once they're there, their mindset is made up, it's always an exciting conversation to have.
And has anyone else got anything to add on that?
I guess from my experience in my conversations with our customers who are moving from a monolithic to composable, one of the things that does come up is, you know, in the past they were able to deal with just one vendor, and the relationship was with this one account manager who they could go to discuss any issues they're having within, you know, with their deployment. And with composable, all of a sudden, you have to deal with multiple vendors. So there isn't this idea of a single throat to choke, and if you want to be nice about it, like a single hand to shake anymore, right? So that is one of the challenges that people definitely are talking about. The other is integration. So a lot of the vendors that are out there in the composable space they have repackaged their solutions from traditional monolith solutions and calling themselves headless or API first, when their architectures were never really built in the first place as a headless platform. And I don't want to name names out there, but there are lots out there that have done that. So when they put their names in the hat and say, here, you know, we're headless, go on and build your composable solution with our software, it's not as easy as it would have been if they were truly headless to begin with. So there is this, and that kind of goes to that next question about what's the difference between headless and composable, right? So
that's
being
exactly
headless
what I was
means,
come to, yeah, because
right.
Jeff at Kashmir Centre was asking this, and it's also something, to be honest with you, that comes up in my head. Is I know headless is the coupling of the back and the front end, but actually, what is the difference between headless and composable?
Exactly. So there's I would say two big differences between headless and traditional. So I'm going to get to composable in a second, but One big difference is that all headless platforms should at least have an API, a standard way of getting data into and out of a system through an API, right? So that allows two different applications to talk to each other in an easy way. The second difference is that you want your content that you're writing, and content could be, it's a broad definition, it could be your product information, it could be your banners or offers or promotions, blog articles, knowledge articles, whatever you can imagine, something that needs to be presented to the customer. That is what content is. That content can't be tied to the presentation layer too tightly, which means that the content should not know where it is being served and how that content is going to look visually in that end channel, right? So that's the separation between content and presentation. So that same article, same blog, same banner, same image, you should be able to display that in the web or on mobile or in an email or in the SMS without specifying at the content level how it needs to be displayed at each level. So that determination of what that content looks like or what that final experience looks like should be in the presentation layer or another discussion or in some sort of a channel orchestration layer that is responsible for the actual delivery of that content. Now, the headless and composable are not at odds with each other. What they really are is headless softwares or SaaS platforms. They lend themselves nicely to build a composable architecture because of the fact that they are separating content and experience from each other. They have that API layer, they have that integration layer. So it's very easy to connect the one headless platform to another headless platform. And just coming back to, I think, Mike, you're going to be speaking about POCs shortly as well. And I think I'm going to let you actually do that because I think this is going to tie right into that topic as well, and how easy POCs can be with composable and headless platforms.
Well, in that case, Mike, take it away. Tell us about POCs, proof of concepts. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you for that lovely intro. So POCs, proof of concepts, are nothing new to the industry. They've been around for a long time in different guises, but they do lend themselves beautifully to composable. I mean, in simplistic terms, I guess it's the way of validating an idea or a concept. So it's quite good, for example, if you're talking to a customer and they're looking maybe to change tech stack, but they have an integration with a CRM or a PIM that is absolutely kind of paramount. You could look at building out, after a discovery period, which we'll get to in a second, some sort of proof of concept, which basically means you spin up a very kind of stripped down version that basically does the absolute core that you need it to. You're looking at core functionalities of achieving that and validating that connection can actually work. Off the back of that, you can then, assuming it validates what you need it to, you can move into the latter stages of MVP, which is minimum viable product, which is basically the core that you need that platform to do, the absolute minimum that you need it to do. So it needs to have the commerce, the payment system, all those integrations with the CRMs, but it might not have integrations on omnichannel and that sort of thing, which comes later down the line. But just to take it back to the kind of the first step in terms of the discovery, we'd always look to have that conversation with the client in terms of what is it you want to kind of look at, what is it what you want to do, and understand the needs for the PSE, the needs for the kind of the main pain point, but also kind of further down the line, what is it they're trying to kind of achieve. Have workshops, understand it, deliver a solution or an example solution. You then go into the kind of UX prototyping and just making sure that, again, it makes sense. You do some customer research and user testing just again to validate that. Once that's kind of, you've got that into a nice state, you can then spin up POCs. That can be done quite easily with Composable, because again, every element of it is kind of isolated. So rather than having to spin up an entire monolith just to be able to test something, and in some ways monoliths, they feel in a way, because everything's kind of tied together, that it seems in a way simpler and quicker to get them up. But they're obviously the issues then lie further down the line when you actually want to add some customization. So where the composable route may seem a bit more kind of complex, where there's so many different elements of it, the POC side of it is a lot simpler, because you can spin up an independent kind of isolated instance, work out that actually does what it needs to, then you can build up the other composable elements, whether it be PIM or LMS, and kind of connect them to then build into the MVP.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've got a question actually, which is, do you think that monolithic platforms, do you think they all will move towards being composable? I mean, will the monolith not exist at some point in the future, in effect?
Good question. It's hard to say. I think I think that it's very hard to give it's a good question, right? I think I think yes is the short answer. I would say. I think as we've touched on before, right, there's a requirement to do things differently, right? The old way is not really sustainable or suitable anymore for a lot of the reasons we've talked about today. So something has to change, and so yeah, I would say yes. I say there will be the fact that you can modularize your tech stack, you can interchange best of breed solutions, you can build that with very quickly, you can deploy and release things faster, you can create a more personalized experience, you can do all these really cool things. I think it is the only way I'd say forward, I guess, like having all of your solutions and tech stack within one vendor end to end, it just doesn't cut it anymore. So yes, I would say it's heading that direction. Yes.
What do you think, Sana? Do you think that's what will happen? That Shopify won't exist as Shopify does now?
I think that this is a very political question, but it is actually happening now. From all of the conversations and the trends that I'm seeing, and people that I'm speaking to, even if these monoliths have not done so yet from an architectural standpoint, they're already coming across as, or saying to the public that we have a headless solution and that all of the pieces within our platform are already composed. So not composable, but composed, as in they work well together and they can be replaced by other vendor solutions. So yes, we have a CMS. Yes, we have a PIM. Yes, we have a commerce engine. Yes, we have a CRM, but you could take somebody else's CRM, or you can just take somebody else's CMS. But the problem is that each of these individual business capabilities are starting to become commoditized because of that idea. And that means that these large vendors have to reduce the price of each of those individual modules, because now they're competing with best of breed vendors who don't charge millions of dollars per year for the subscription. They're just a lot cheaper. So there is that a bit of a tug of war, I would say, at play here. They're trying to figure out, should we package it all together and still keep that single relationship with the customer so that we can charge a ton of money from the customer, or should we actually allow other vendors to enter the space? Because as soon as you do that, you open a can of worms. I'm just saying from their standpoint, you're opening up the space for everybody to come and compete and have a leveled playing field for everyone, and that makes it very difficult for the monoliths to survive, right? I mean, they're used to the big checks, and that's not going to happen anymore if you break things up like this.
It's better for the retailer, though.
It's better for the retailer. Absolutely better for the retailer. Exactly. So it's a buyer's market.
Yeah.
Now,
I think that one of the things that would be useful to understand is if you're out there already existing as a site, whatever sort of platform you're on, when do you move to composable? You know, what are the signs that you should be moving to a composable solution? Mike, I don't know if you want to come in there, and then perhaps go back to you, Sana.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess, yeah, there's a number of signals, I guess, that might signal that you need to move to a re-platform on Composable. I guess new things within the business. So it might be that you've taken on a new product, or you decide you need to go omni-channel, and that isn't suitable within your existing system. Things like slow site speed, I said that after I've had a few, again, are a factor. Poor site performance, so not necessarily site speed, but the number of SKUs you've got and processes that are behind the scenes that are just taking too long to do. It's starting to show its age. Lack of scalability. There's so many different kind of options that might be flags, aside from just the desire to actually want to be ahead of the curve. These are all kind of more reactive things, but there's obviously more proactive things that people should be looking at as well, in terms of making sure that their site is more future focused, and more it has a better user journey, not just from kind of landing on the site, the personalization, but the checkout process, the kind of omni-channel stuff. People are tied to brands because of the relationship they have there. So if you've got a really good, clear customer experience, which is going to be generally better on a composable architecture, then you're going to be ahead of the curve.
And Finlay, what do you think? When should you become composable?
So the word that I'd like to use, or often do use, is the word friction. So if you're experiencing friction in your business across anything, some of the things that Mike just mentioned there as well, you want to launch new products, or you want to sell internationally, or you want to empower your team. Certain things that are just difficult to do and slow and cumbersome, that's friction within the business. So you want to try and fix that. You want to try and solve that. In the monolithic world, it's you have to speak to your account manager, you have to speak to get a change request done. It could take weeks and months, it's just not an agile, fast way to do things. So I would say, if you're experiencing friction in your business, you're trying to think about, well, how do I remove that friction? And certainly you should start thinking about headless and composable, and how these sort of frameworks can help support you. And just to reiterate, it doesn't need to be a big bang, like re-platform and all these words that people don't want to use anymore. There are paths to move towards a composable tech stack in a nice, granular, slow, I say slow, but in a pace that suits you. So if you're experiencing friction, then certainly it's something to consider and something to explore. Yeah.
Perfect. And Sana, when would you be advising people to move to composable?
I think it's always a good idea to move to composable to some degree, but I think there's also a question about, if you're starting from scratch, should you start with composable? And I would say definitely yes, but I think going back to what I was saying earlier, which pieces do you consider as your packaged business capability as the core? You have to be very careful with that. So if it is a commerce business, and depending on the size of your business as well, CMS and commerce engines are typically the core, the centerpiece of the overall composable architecture. So you have to start with that, and you have to make sure that the two that you pick have to work well together, right there, and you have to define those workflows around who is managing or creating content, and who's managing or creating categories and products and whatnot, and is there an interrelationship between those two, and can that be managed with these two systems right from the beginning? So I would say it's always best to do that. One point that I didn't mention before that I think is important is that from a talent standpoint, the new generation of developers and technologists, they all want to work with headless, API first, modern platforms. So a lot of the older traditional monolithic platforms are having a hard time retaining talent, right? So if you're gonna pick right from the beginning, you wanna put your bets on the composable side, because at least you're gonna get support down the road. Right? If you go with the older guys, what's going to end up happening is all of their staff is eventually going to start to move towards the more modern vendors, and you just don't have that support from them in the long term that you're going to need as such a core part of your infrastructure.
Which of course is a major consideration, isn't it? It's like we're into our last 5 minutes now, and you know, remember there's a kind of sort of free networking session in effect after this, so I think the link will be dropped in soon. The panelists and myself are going to come on, so if there is anyone who wants to kind of pop on and ask a direct question, it's a little bit of a chance to do that sort of more one-on-one. And in fact, there we are, it's just been dropped in to the chat now, so so do grab that and kind of pop in as soon as we sort of finish on here. So in this last sort of few minutes then, I want to kind of give each panelist a sort of minute each to do their sort of top tips, their top takeaways from today. And Finlay, as soon as you're off mute, I'm going to come to you first.
My top tip is to not be scared of composable or headless. You know, I guess I appreciate that these are new terms and we're always coming up with new acronyms and ways of describing things. Hopefully today has shed some light on what those terms mean. Just to reiterate one of the points Mike was making, the proof of concepts, yes, they've been around a long time, but I would put a more heightened focus on them to be able to prove the business case to not only yourself, but to your colleagues in your business that this is the right way forward. You know, there is some apprehension when new things come on the table, but have a bit of confidence. And yeah, I guess my top tip is to be bold, be brave, and obviously come and speak to Better Commerce, because we're perfectly suited to help you.
Good plug, Mike. Your chance to do your roundup.
Thank you. I guess it's around having that digital maturity and understanding that. I don't think it's like moving from monolith A to monolith B. Moving from kind of monolith to composable is a step change, and I think you need to consider that, and also to consider kind of long term as well, not just what you need now, which kind of goes back to the question that we were answering earlier in terms of should you go composable for day one. You don't want to go monolith and then have to, as your needs change, move to composable, and then you have that kind of that migration in a way. If you move to composable to start with, you may scale and you may change, but it's an easier step to make those changes when you're already in that ecosphere. So I would say, when you're thinking about it, kind of think long term, but it's a better place to be, I think, to make those changes when you're in that space.
Excellent. So Sana, you've got the last word on this, your top tip.
And it's hard because Mike and Finlay have already covered pretty much everything that I was going to say.
You have to think of something new.
Yeah, I'm trying to do that. So I think the biggest, I would say, top tip from my perspective is that you have to see this as a journey towards composability. It's not. It's a spectrum. It's not a binary choice, right? So you have to just see where you are, what your organization is like. As Mike said, what's the digital maturity of the organization, what the needs are, and move from monolith to composable in a very in a very deliberate and thoughtful way, understanding what each change is going to bring to your organizations, and not just jump into it without, giving it any thought of how this is going to affect your workflows and your entire team, and how you're going to work together, right? So it requires very strong consideration.
Absolutely. And I think we've got a kind of final comment from our sort of chat box as well. And Nick, who came on earlier, has said, would you buy all your clothes from one brand? No, that's all you need to understand. So there we are. So that's the roundup from today. So I want to say thank you very much to our amazing panel. You've been absolutely superb. So, thank you to Mike, thank you to Sana, thank you very much to you, Finlay, and of course to Better Commerce for supporting today. And in fact, thank you very much to our partners over at the Fashion Network, and of course for the people coming on who've listened into the webinar today, but also sort of those many thousands of people who will now come and listen to this on YouTube as well. So, you know, for all of those people that are listening into this content at some point in the future. We're going to hop off now onto this kind of sort of speed networking. So, you know, without much further ado, I'm going to kind of close off today's session, but have a lovely afternoon, and great thanks to all of you for taking part.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Cheers.